All right, Avengers fans, and we are back with 2025 coming to a close. We have a phenomenal guest today. I'm sure everyone that has ever read an Avengers comic book knows this guy. I am DJ Ken. Got joined once again, co-host Bud Young. Bud, how we doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, Ken. How are you?
I'm great. Because all Avengers fans, we have the great, marvelous Steve Englehart.
Yeah, the Avengers fan without a Steve Englehart.
Yeah, you can't do
So,
it. You can't do it. And I would tell everyone that has followed us and has never watched this, and this interview is 30 plus years in the making. Okay, I was telling Bud, Steve, you wrote the comic book that started my comic book collection. It was Silver Surfer 29, well, 29 and 30. So the year was
Mm.
89. I was so into that comic book. I wrote a letter to Marvel. It didn't get published. Okay, it broke my heart, but it was toward the end of your series in Silver Surfer. But I was amazed of not only Ron Lim's art, but I was around 10, 11 years old. And what I got from that was the whole political intrigue between the Creeds and Skrulls, and like you have the racial tension. And my mom was just, taken back that I was just got so into that book. And she asked me, "What do you want for Christmas?" And I said, "I just want comic books, Mom." And that Christmas, everyone just spent $20 in comic books and started my comic book collection. So thank
Wow.
you, Steve, for starting my comic book collection. It was awesome.
That's
It
a
was
good
awesome.
story.
Yes,
That's a
yes,
good story.
yes. I'm
Although it
glad
must have been weird. I mean, my run ended in 31. So, I mean, you're coming in at the end of the Kree Skrull War and everything before that. So that must have been a strange place to start.
well, I had just my first comic book I bought was a West Coast Avengers 44, but like that I snuck in. I found like $1 somewhere and went to like a 7-Eleven spinner rack and bought 44. But we were Christmas shopping because toward the end of the series was toward November, and I went up to Heroes World in our mall, and I was just looking at all the comic books. And my mom came in, she was like, "Oh, you've been here a while. Like, what do you want?" I was like, "I want that one." But
Mhm.
after that, once you get a good comic book, you have to get the back issues, Steve.
Right. Yep. Yep.
You have to get the back issues. And so, like, yes, you know, then I started picking up all your other backstories, West Coast Avengers, Captain America. Um, so you you you're on the Mount Rushmore to me. Yeah. But I digress. Bud, kick us off, man.
well, thank you, Steve, for being with us today. I know we've talked before, but
Right.
um, but this is more. So this is the Avengers Forever podcast. So we're just focus on a lot of Avengers stuff, and we might branch off a little bit. Then we might sneak in a few other questions in there. But I wanted to spend a lot of time just kind of uh, giving the Facebook fans on Avengers Forever just some backstory and give them some if they have any questions. Did we put up a question block for anybody to drop some questions in, or no?
We did not. This is a Christmas surprise. So, uh,
Oh,
yeah, Christmas surprise. Yeah,
Christmas surprise for the fans.
yeah.
All right. Um, so I guess uh, so we want to just start off with your Avengers history. I know you started in issue 105, and there was a bunch of classic stories. So I wanted to just kind of throw some out there and then see like why maybe you went that way. I know that from what I gather, you're a huge fan of like some of the '50s Marvel stuff from what I've seen, like the westerns and the romance
Yeah.
comics and
Yeah. I was a huge fan of everything that had come before me, before I had everything was before me, before I became, a professional. So I just, as a fan, I read everything I could get my hands on. Loved comics.
So tell me about Patsy Walker. I know that this is a one question that Ken wanted to ask. Uh, go ahead. Patsy Walker, Hellcat.
Well, I knew Patsy from her comic book and from Patsy and Hetty. And for people who, I mean, this is very obscure these days, but I mean, Patsy Walker was originally sort of I don't know, like an Archie strip or something. I mean, it was the sort of funny, cartoony comic for girls. And then when the 60s came along and the superheroes started rolling and everybody had their own ongoing story, Stan decided to turn her and Hetty Wolf into a soap opera thing, a more adult, quote unquote, sort of thing. Anyway, so I had read that stuff and I like soap opera. I was good with Patsy and Hetty and her boyfriend Buzz and all that stuff. But that was like not in the superhero world. And then in Fantastic Four Annual number 4, Reed and Sue got married and they come out of the church and everybody in Marveldom is standing outside congratulating them. And in the crowd, as a joke, I'm sure, Stan threw in Patsy and Hetty. But that meant that she was in the Marvel Universe now. And then when I was given my first book, which was The Beast, I had access to the X-Men characters, but that was basically it. I mean, if you're the Fantastic Four writer, you're in charge of Doctor Doom and Annihilus and all that stuff. Nobody was writing the X-Men, so I was in charge of the X-Men, but I didn't there weren't an infinite number of supporting characters, and I got this idea to bring Patsy in, just because it was kind of off the wall and I was operating off to the side of everything anyway. So I brought her in, and at one point she tells the Beast that she will help him do what he needs to do, but she has a condition. And then the book got canceled, and we never found out what the condition was, right? So later on, when I was revamping the Avengers after Mantis and the Celestial Madonna and all that, I had this idea of making her the Hellcat. And the idea was that her condition was she wanted to be a superheroine. She, had been just a normal person, but she wanted to get in on all this fun that everybody was having. And so that, the Beast there was still no X-Men book at that point. So I could put the Beast in the Avengers, and that brought me back to what it was she wanted from the Beast. And so there she came. And Hellcat, I mean, there had been a book called The Cat with that costume. Marvel had a brief run at trying to do comics for girls, written by girls, drawn by girls if they could. If they had them, not if girls could draw. But there weren't that many girls doing professional comics, but Marie Severin was in there and other people. And the book had failed. The Cat had failed. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, I thought of the term Hellcat, and all that stuff came together. So that's, Jimmy Carter said once that he threw everything into the Cuisinart of his mind. And that's basically the way my mind works. It's just all these things are floating around in there. And if I can connect some of them, then that's fun.
Was it a conscious thought for you to have more like women Avengers characters? Because you brought in Moondragon too.
Right. Well, when I took over the Avengers, I was told that Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, she would do a hex and then she'd fall down exhausted. And I thought, that's kind of lame to be an Avenger. I mean, I was following Stan and Roy, so it's not like they were lame, but it was the change into the 70s, I think, the women's liberation and all that. I just thought that's not much, not real helpful as an Avenger. So I started out right away on the Avengers in 105, making Wanda more stronger, mm-hmm. Right? And I like all women. I like all characters, I mean, it's not like they have to be strong women, but I never had a problem doing strong women. And so Wanda was in there, Mockingbird later, in West Coast Avengers. And Patsy was never as hardcore as those two, but she was. I did that 3-part thing with Norm Brayfogle in like 2001, and what I really liked about it is she's going to hell and fighting the devil, but she keeps saying, "I'm just a girl. I'm just," and that's what I always thought about her. She's just, she's just a normal teenage, now early 20s, whatever girl, but she's got pluck. She's got, whatever it is required in order to be a superhero. She's never going to be, the leader of the Avengers, although they could have done that 5 times in the last 20 years for all I know. But, I mean, I don't see her as, the strongest Avenger, but she's a solid Avenger, and she's a solid person. And I think that's what I really got out of her. I just liked her pluck, her never say die spirit.
Did she fit in better as a defender than as an Avenger? Do you think she ended up in the Defenders for a long time?
She did, yeah. Well, that was other people after me. So,
yeah.
The whole thing with her and Moondragon being friends, that was somebody else. When I put her in there in like 144 or something like that, and I left the book at 150 or 151, so I didn't get to do much with her in the Avengers. I always bring this up when she comes up. I don't know if you're aware of Carlos Pacheco's cover for the issue in which she was introduced. Do you know about that?
No.
If you look on my wall back there, it's small, but that's the cover that Carlos drew for the Spanish edition, and it's basically her ass.
Yeah, that's. I was just going to say, is that her butt? Yeah, okay.
That's her butt, and the Beast is down there looking very definitely up at her eyes, But he's like, but that's what Carlos did for the Spanish edition, and he was nice enough to give me that original art before he passed, right? So I love Gil Kane's cover for the American version, the original version too, but that's just such a funny cover that Carlos did, that whenever she comes up, I have to point that out.
Oh, that's fantastic. I love that. So the other strong female character that I wanted to talk to you about, it seems to find her way into all of your work, is Mantis.
Right.
So tell me, how did she germinate in your head? Was that just a whole cloth already done, or
no? In fact, she is very important to my career in that she taught me a lot of stuff about writing. Just as I did her, I learned stuff. She was originally going to be a hooker from Saigon who had, attached herself to the swordsman. And when he got back in the Avengers, she was going to like come in and start seducing all the male Avengers and just, not try necessarily, but I mean, just cause a lot of dissension. That was my plan. And then right after I introduced her, Roy said that they weren't going to do any Avenger or any annuals at all that summer. And as a fan, I had really liked the annuals, the extra size and the reprints of the stories I didn't see and all that kind of stuff. So I said, well, there ought to be something, for the fans this summer. And I was writing both the Avengers and the Defenders. And I thought, why don't I do the crossover thing? And what that meant was Mantis had to become like a team player. There was no room to be seducing people and causing dissension when you're in the midst of, a whole series of half-issue stories that carried this whole concept forward. So she never, later on, of course, she started messing around with the Vision, which was a remnant of her original impetus. But I had to completely change who she was because of the story that I was now writing. And then, she's the one who taught me, you can say, well, I'm going to do this thing in my story, But when the characters are actually in the story and they're reacting to things that other characters are doing, they sometimes logically they say something that takes them off in a different direction from where you thought they were going to go. And you can either yank them back, which always looks stupid, or you can just go with it. And that's what I did. I mean, her whole thing that I didn't plan on a year and a half of, you know, mystery after mystery after mystery leading to her marrying a tree. That, you know, that was all, you know, just this is unfolds. And then next month it unfolds and next month it unfolds. So the idea of letting your characters tell you who they are, I mean, it's all very meta because it's me being her telling me what it is, but just in trying to write the characters as real people with real motivations and reacting to other real people, they become what they become, and that is a great lesson that I learned through her. So I had to bring it to an end eventually, and I did. And, you know, she married the tree and all that kind of stuff. And then 7 months later, no, longer than that. But I mean, a year later, year and a half later, I left Marvel and I went down to the San Diego Comic Convention. And a fan came up to me and he said, "Does that mean we're never going to see Mantis again?" Which I immediately go, well, wait, how can I do that? How can I use her even though I'm not working for Marvel? And that led to her appearing as Willow in Justice League when I started writing Justice League. So then I thought, well, hell, I'll put her in everything that I ever do. I'll just rename her and put her in everything. So then she did show up in the Scorpio Rose Coyote, I think. I'm not sure where I put her then, but soon enough I realized, no, I can't put this character in everything that I do. That's would be too over the top and too hard to do, actually, you know. But I did like the fact that she was Mantis and then she was Willow, and then I had her live in Willomantic, Connecticut, in her later incarnation. I think it was very nice of that town to name itself so that I could make use of it, you know. So that's the Mantis. And then I guess the last thing is with Celestial Quest. When I came back to Marvel briefly in the early 2000s, Tom Brevoort asked me to do that. He said, you know, they've really screwed her up. She's gone off in all sorts of directions and it's not. So I want you to, you know, like reestablish her the way you want her, which I did. And then since then, she's gone off in all sorts of directions. And specifically, finally, Guardians of the Galaxy movies, right? Where James Gunn, I asked him, why does that character have no relationship at all to my character? And he said, well, I needed a character who did what that character in the movie does. And I always have to say, I like that character in the movie. I like the movies. I like the character in the movies. I like Palm Clementieff, who plays her in the movies. But she has no relation. The only relationship between that character and my character is they're both female. Everything else is different. Skin color, speech patterns, history, everything. So it's nice to have Mantis in the movies. But, you know, everybody, I don't know. It's just some people, I'm not really sure why she went off in all these different directions in the comics. And, you know, and James Gunn was quite straightforward. And I mean, I totally get the fact that James Gunn doesn't want me going, that's not my character, you know? So it's like, yeah, okay, fine. You know, I understand you needed that character and thank you for calling her Mantis, you know, is where that comes out. That's my complete Mantis answer, I guess. You know?
Did it now? So Mantis basically had a mind of her own
Right.
like
Right.
when she came into your like kind of guided what you were doing. Does that make it easier, a more organic storyline for yourself, or was it easier to write her because she was kind of giving you the words? Or
Well, I mean, again, with pretty much all my characters and all my stories, I'd think, well, okay, what's this story about? How's this going to work? Et cetera, et cetera. But I really, until I start writing the dialogue, till I start actively saying something, and then that's true, and then I have to take that and run with that. So I that's very easy for me now, and I don't have to like struggle to do that sort of thing. So that's just part of my process, in that um I mean, I don't think as soon as I say this, I'm not sure that it's true, but I mean, I'm not sure that I have ever had a character who just totally surprised, it's like, I have no idea what this character's doing. No, I have some idea what this character's doing, but I really find that it's the details. It's it's like what's happening here and now tells me what's going to happen next. And I may be steering it in some direction. And, as I say, I don't want to yank people back if they've gone off in a different direction. If I need them to go someplace else, then that's a journey that they can make as they go off in this new direction, but then find a way to get back. And I've done that, but I just love characters, and it's fun for me to write all these different characters and try to see what's different about all of them. Why is Mantis different from the Scarlet Witch, different from Hellcat, whatever. Um, and I find that out by doing it.
Is that part of what's appealing for Avengers, with having that ever changing canvas of characters for you to play with, bring new characters in if one gets stale, or um, trying
Yeah.
to find different ways to go?
Well, that had been established, right? I mean, that's part
Yeah.
of the Avengers mystique. So, it was something that I should have done, from time to time. Um, and yeah, it was, when I took over in 105, as you say, it was 114, I think, before Mantis showed up. And then up through 136, whatever it is, I just did, stuff that involved Mantis here or there. And then she was done. And then it was time, to do a new team. And I did give consideration at that point, who's in this team, I want the Beast. I don't think I thought of Hellcat because she joined later, right? But
Yeah.
um, Moondragon, I mean, it just um, who would make which group of personalities would make an interesting group of Avengers, right? And and I'm keeping in mind that it is the Avengers. I'm not, this is not the Champions. This is, this is um it's gotta have a mystique, an Avengers mystique to it. Um but uh yeah, I mean that was interesting to kind of think, okay, well now if I was going to totally recreate this team now, who would I put in it, and what, and why would they be there, and so forth.
So I guess I have this little side question, I guess, because you had Black Widow join in issue 111, and then
Yeah,
was that an
that was
aborted experiment, or?
no, I think it was just me still not quite sure of what I was doing. Frankly, I was looking for guest stars. I liked the Black Widow. I put her in there. Um, but it's kind of like when Roy decided that Captain America should get stronger, and he should take this serum and get stronger. And I did that, and then sort of immediately forgot about it. And then, so he never really changed particularly. Um, Mostly because I just, I was doing other stuff, and it wasn't my idea. And I mean, not that I just counted Roy's ideas when he would offer them, but it just never stuck with me, so it went away. And it's kind of the same with her. It was just like, well, I can have Daredevil and Black Widow in this thing and do a thing, and then um but I was still that first half year, basically first 9 issues, whatever, 105, there was some nice stuff in there. I will say, but I was still kind of like how exactly do I do the Avengers? Because, I mean, again, I was a third guy, right? I mean, it would have been
Yeah.
Stan, and then it
And
had been
Roy.
Roy.
Yeah.
And I considered Roy's books to be the best Marvel books when I was a fan reading them. I thought Roy's stuff was the best there was. And so, you know, asked me to take over from him, which was a compliment. But on the other hand, it's like, um, I totally remember a couple years later, I was with a bunch of people and I said, I'm the only Avengers fan in the whole world who can't be surprised every month, you know?
No, that's
Uh,
great.
so it was like in those early, that first year, half year, whatever, I was trying to write Roy Thomas stories. I was trying to think, okay, what was Roy's voice? What was Roy's sensibility? How would he do this? And I can I do that too? And I wasn't happy with it. I didn't really have a handle on it because as anyone will tell you in this circumstance, what I should have been writing and eventually figured out was Steve Englehart stories, right? I have a different sensibility. I have a different, whatever. Um, so trying to emulate Roy, even though he was the gold standard as far as I was concerned, was not the way to go, as it turned out. But we're talking the first year of my career, and I was still figuring stuff like that out.
Mm. Well, you did grow in leaps and bounds as far as I was concerned. There was always something cool happening. So
I was doing my best, whatever my best was at the time, but it got better over time as I got more of a command of what it was I was doing.
So let's talk about time travel for a bit because you have a
Mm,
couple of great I always call them Steve Englehart time travel epics. You know, some great a great Kang story in the 70s with with him going back in time with Hawkeye and Two Gun Kid and then there was of course the West Coast Avengers when you were writing West Coast.
yeah.
Um
Well, um, I did the whole thing with Kang and Immortus and Doctor Doom. That had been established. Again, that was not my idea that they were all the same person, or at
mhm.
least possibly they were all the same person. Um, and so I got to thinking about doing a story with time travel and all that. And right around then, I read something where somebody said nobody has ever done a successful time travel story because they always miss out on some connection. There's something happened that they didn't take into account. So, of course, I said, I'm going to make that work. I'm going to do that. And so I did the thing with the Avengers and Kang and Immortus and all that. And I hope that I dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's and so forth. And it seemed like people thought I did. So then when it came around time to come up with a West Coast Avengers story at a later point, I thought, well, it worked once. Let's see what I can do here with, this one and make it even more complex and so forth. See, that kind of stuff is fun for me. I mean, I like writing characters, as I said, and I like creating realities, right? I mean,
Yes.
that's what you're supposed to be doing as a writer, as far as I know. And so I liked setting myself challenges. It's like, okay, can I do this thing that hasn't been done before? Can I, uh, I there's over the years I've seen people who say, I really liked this thing when I was a kid. I'm going to do it again. And I'm like, no, dude, no, if you liked it, run with it, do something else with it. And that was always my thing. It's like I loved everything that had come before me, but I thought it was incumbent upon me to like take it farther and do something new with it and all that. So that was always my approach to that. This hasn't been done yet. How can I do it?
Was it so the West Coast Avenger story? Was that like, can I do a time travel story without Kang?
Well, I Kang travels through time, yes, but I mean, yes, I didn't have any need for him, but I did, later on. Um, I mean, with Kang back in the Avengers. Well, back in the Avengers, I really liked the idea. that you could fight this war against him and he would lose and he would go away and he'd spend 10 years figuring out what the hell he was going to do with you guys. And then he'd come back 30 seconds later while you're still like mopping up from the last one. He would come back with this whole new plan. So I did that thing in the Avengers where he came back and then he came back again and people started to write in and go, I want to see Kang that much. So I think probably when I was doing the West Coast Avengers, I wasn't thinking about it. Let's put Kang in this, it was like, what else can I do?
Well, it was kind of funny because I was thinking like, I think Roger Stern used Kang right around the same time that you were writing West Coast,
Okay.
on the East Coast Avengers. And up until that point, I don't think they had used Kang since you finished his story in the giant size issues with Celestial Madonna. I don't think Kang had made an appearance in like 15 years. So I thought it was interesting.
Yeah. Well, I like Kang again, I like what he can do. And I will say that I liked Jonathan Majors as Kang. Sorry that he beat up his girlfriend, but I was looking forward to Kang as the big bad in the Marvel movies. I thought he was doing a good job as an actor.
Well, I don't think hope is lost in that. I think they might be bringing him back from what I hear. But,
really? Okay.
Well,
there's a rumor.
See what happens.
Everybody gets rehabilitated.
Yeah. He just had to go away for a while,
Yeah.
Let's see. I have other questions for you. Oh, yeah. We touched on the Avengers Defenders crossover. One of my parallel I wanted to draw at that was, how much influence did you get from the JLA JSA crossovers from the 60s?
Just the fact that they existed. I read all those things, right? I mean, I knew about that. Somebody made the distinction that they came from two different eras, and my thing was all the same era. But other than that, I mean, the idea of doing a crossover, definitely, that I read everything. I knew about all that JLA JSA stuff. So I didn't invent that at all.
But it was the first time really Marvel had done anything like that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, I was fortunate enough to be enough of a fan to think I should do something, and I was writing both books. By the time I got done with it, I always liked the Defenders a lot too. I mean, I liked them both, but I realized that I couldn't do two team books because there's only so many villain teams and, people who can stand up to teams. So by the time I got to the end of the Avengers Defenders thing, I had to get rid of one. And even though I really did like the Defenders a lot, obviously the Avengers was the way to go if I was only going to do one. But yes, I liked them all.
Did that work at the time to get more eyes on a Defenders book? Because that was just in its infancy too, right?
Yeah. Well, no, the Defenders book was doing well. But so it wasn't a question of, I mean, I probably did get more eyes on it, but it wasn't a question of a sales gimmick or anything. I just thought, how would I do this? How this is a challenge. Can I, and when I proposed it to Roy, and I've said many times that we had complete freedom in those days. And again, Roy's only comment was, if you miss any deadline, everything will topple over like dominoes. So I said, I won't miss any deadlines. And I didn't. And, I mean, that was the bargain. I mean, you had to produce, and I said, I will, so, but then it was interesting. I had a great time sitting there and figuring out who was going to fight who, in what order, how was that going to advance the overall story. I mean, all that stuff is part of doing stories, and I just, I loved all that stuff.
I did too. When I was collecting the back issues of the Avengers, and that was I loved every time there was a membership change because I was always like,
Yeah.
oh, there's some new stories with Mantis and Swordsman. I was like, I don't know who these guys are, you know. And Swordsman was around relatively little, you know, so
Right. He was,
was,
he was from out of the past and kind of looked cool, but he'd been a failure the first time. So he was always going to be a failure the second time, in my opinion. I didn't know he was going to die, when I started with him. That again was just how the stories played out. Um, but yeah,
I think he had like a bad case of imposter syndrome. I think, you know, as far
yeah,
as
yeah, I think so.
didn't think he belonged.
Yeah, and showing up with a Vietnamese hooker probably I don't know what he was expecting to accomplish, so uh
Did you have an affinity for the Vision? Because I know that you did.
yeah.
You basically fleshed out his origin story a little bit more than it had
Well,
been.
that was again, I take very little credit for that. I mean, that was when Roy and Neil Adams did like Avengers 97 or somewhere in there where they went inside. What'd they do?
They had that
Oh
was
yeah,
Ant-Man. Yeah,
Ant-Man went inside the Vision, and he said something about that. He said something ambiguous, which was
like I've seen
which was
this before. You're like, yeah, like
yeah,
parts.
something. And Roy, I was working there by that time, and Roy said, "Well, the fact is, he's really the original Human Torch," because Roy loves that stuff from the 40s.
Oh, okay.
Do we not know that? I thought that was
No,
Well, no,
no,
we knew
I don't
that.
know if I don't know if we knew that was Roy's idea.
Yeah, we didn't.
No, it was it
Yeah.
was Roy's idea, and so it was
Oh.
like known in house until I got around to doing something with it. He had
Oh,
thrown this thing out there, and he said that's the secret. But then he left the book and I was doing other stuff, and it took me a while, obviously, before I got around to that. But I was just playing that out at that point. Um, I think it's a great idea. I really liked the idea. Um, but when I look back at my Avengers, the through line for all of them is Vision and Witch.
mhm.
Wanda and the Vision are like the characters because they were cool characters. They were only in the Avengers. Thor, Iron Man, Captain America. I had to, fit them into whatever else they were doing. And I just really liked them as a couple. I liked the two of them. I liked her stronger that I'd made her. She became basically the strong one in the relationship. I mean, she was the one who was, standing up when people would get pissy with him. And so the ongoing story of Wanda and the Vision is kind of the through line, even though Mantis is an ongoing story and some of these others are. So when I came back to Marvel in the 80s and they wanted me to do a Vision Witch thing, I had gotten them married and I thought, okay, what do married people do? Well, they have kids, and so it was the ongoing story of them. I have to say, it seems like a lot of my strong women have been killed or something, right after I leave the books. Kat Matui and Green Lantern got killed. Mockingbird got sent to hell. I mean, it's just I'm not sure what other people what their approach to all this was, but I totally cannot stand the idea that they broke up and she became evil and House of M, all that stuff. Like that's not the character that I liked and ran with for a long time. And again, people can do what they do. It's not my book once I leave it, et cetera, et cetera. But I'm just saying, as a fan, I like them when they're together. And I think they're going to get back together in the second season of WandaVision, but I don't really know. I don't know that for sure, and I don't know what's going on in the comics necessarily. But yeah, no, I just thought they made a great couple, Wanda and the Vision, and that's it.
I will say that Steve Orlando did a phenomenal Vision Scarlet Witch recently. They didn't quite get back together, but they did have that one night that was eternal, which was phenomenal.
Good.
Yeah, but I do have to ask you a question because you tend to bring up a lot of like this is what would happen in real life with a couple or someone in this situation, and you impose it into your story.
Right.
So you brought up the in the West Coast Avengers, you sent everyone back in time, and of course, Mockingbird kills Phantom Rider, and that leads to a big strain between her and Hawkeye.
Right.
Now, were you just imposing some kind of like marital strife into the book, or did you plan for them to kind of split?
Um, I had big plans for all of that. Again, that's a thing where the characters decided what was going on. And I mean, somehow or other, I had the Phantom Rider drug and rape Mockingbird. But Mockingbird had been an agent of S.H.I.E.L.D. And agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in my opinion, didn't play by, the Marquis of Queensberry rules. So it was very straightforward for me to have her kill him. It's just like, that's what she would do. That's what she, agent S.H.I.E.L.D. is some sort of secret agency, and those guys kill people. And Hawkeye was very much an Avenger, and having sort of, I always thought with him, he had been a second tier Avenger and he'd worked his way up to being a first tier Avenger, and he was the leader of this group. And so he was very much involved with what the Avengers are supposed to be. And the fact that she didn't play that game, I was loving the conflict between the two of them. And what I was doing, where I was going with that was, and I only got started before I got bounced, but um, uh, I was eventually going to have all the Avengers, West and East Coast, choose up sides. Are you on her side or are you on his side? And it was going to be basically what became the Civil War later on, the thing that they did as Civil War, where the two sides just, cannot interact. And I don't know how that would have ended. Because I let the characters tell me, and I never got to write those stories. So I don't know if Hawkeye and Mockingbird would have split up, whether they would have found a way to paper this over. I don't know what that would have done to the Avengers and the West Coast Avengers. All that stuff I was really looking forward to doing that. And then Marvel editorial went in a different direction. So, um, but yeah, that was, it would have been epic. It would have been epic if
Yeah,
it
we
had been
appreciate
done.
that. Yeah.
You should
Yeah.
do it. You should do what John Byrne does on his site and do his to Steve Englehart
Yeah.
West Coast Avengers run. What would have happened if he didn't leave?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could do.
You should. I'd be on it. I'd be on that site every day.
Yeah, I would read it.
So that I guess I'm just going to kind of go with that. The marriages and everything, and keeping like you had Wanda and Vision and Mockingbird and Hawkeye, and it seems like Marvel doesn't like it when their characters stay married, so they kind of get rid of that. Just Reed and Sue still married, but
Yeah. But they had, Roy did a thing where they kind of split up for a while. Reed and Sue. Yeah. Well, I think the theory is that your audience likes to fantasize about the characters that they like. And if they're married, they're not available, and, and so on and so forth. I mean, John Byrne, recently spoken of, killed off Wanda's kids as soon as he got the chance. I mean, it's like, and then they came back, which was even weirder. But um, some people, I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, again, I like all characters, and some people get married, and so I didn't feel that was, that I needed to keep Wanda single so that, people could fantasize over her, or the Vision single so that people could fantasize over him. And having kids, that's another step. That's even one more step um, to being, turning into a MILF. Uh, um, but that's, yeah. So Hawkeye and Mockingbird were married before I got them.
Yeah.
I got Wanda and the Vision married. Um, John Stewart and Kat Matui were a very solid item. They weren't married, but they were, but they were definitely, they were there. That all just seemed like that's what those characters would do. And that's, and there was nothing in me that said, oh, you can't go there. But obviously, it didn't work for other people. I mean, because they killed Kat Matui. They sent a Mockingbird to hell. It's like, um, I really, I totally understand that people, every month a new issue is going to come out. And if I stop doing it, somebody else is going to start doing it, and they should have the ability to do what they want to do. But that doesn't mean I have to like it,
No, I agree with you 100%. Now, there was a couple of instances where I feel like because you left one book and went over to another book, you carried on your storyline. Um,
Hmm.
so I know that you did a continuation of the Master Pandemonium story in Fantastic Four that you had started in West Coast.
Yeah, well, that was by circumstance. I mean, that was supposed to be a West Coast story, but then, as I say, I got bounced.
Mm.
And um, they yanked me off the West Coast Avengers like overnight, but they gave me 6 months to fill out the Fantastic Four and Silver Surfer, which is why I was still writing it when you discovered it. Um,
Thank
um,
you.
but it was like, as a courtesy to you, you can have 6 months before we kick you out. So I tried to you know, and the Surfer, I tried to do this vast epic, and hopefully I, pulled that off. But the FF, that was just, that's why I took my name off of it eventually, because I had like 4 or 5 epic storylines, multiple issue storylines that I was going to do with Ultron and with all this stuff. And all of a sudden I only had 6 issues left. So I, did the whole thing where the real Fantastic Four is in a coma, and the fake Fantastic Four is sort of plowing through these plot lines as quickly as possible, just to kind of get them all done. And so I moved Master Pandemonium and Mantis over to the FF because I didn't have the West Coast anymore. And since I had time and I was in the middle of a story, it made sense to just continue it over there. But um, not my favorite, not my favorite 6 months in my comic career. I'll say that.
So they told you you have 6 months and then you done?
Yeah, they came and said that uh, it was. I don't want to mention names, but you can figure it
You
out
don't
from the
have to.
time thing. But I mean, there was a new editor at that point, and he came and he said that the guys in charge had decided that they wanted to make as much money out of Marvel as possible. And so, they couldn't sell lunchboxes with Reed and Sue and Ben and Johnny if the comic didn't have Reed and Sue and Ben and Johnny. So you've got to like put them back in and stop doing what you're doing. Um, and as far as the Surfer goes, they said, we want to go back to one issue stories where he flies away feeling bad at the end. And
Ugh.
I said, well, that's what didn't sell. That is exactly what people got tired of seeing. And so when we broke him out and got him into space and did all this stuff with him, that's the stuff that's selling. And they're like, yes, but this is, we want things to be very compartmentalized now. We don't want to have all this extraneous stuff going on. And so they said, we'll give you 6 months to finish up those 2 books. And then, and the other thing they said was, we don't really need people who are high priced. because Spider-Man will always sell, so it doesn't matter anymore who does Spider-Man, they said to me. So then they were bankrupt 4 years later. So, I take some pleasure in that. But that was the Revlon people, and they just wanted to suck as much money out of this acquisition as possible, the way, people who buy things in order to suck money out of them like to do. So they didn't care about Marvel Comics per se. They thought Spider-Man, it's proven quantity now, so we don't have to pay anybody to write it or draw it. We'll just, and so yeah, that was not, it was I didn't like it, obviously, on a personal level and all that. But again, as a stone Marvel fan, I thought, this is wrong. This is just wrong what you guys are doing. But that's what they were doing. So, and I will say, as far as the Surfer goes, I think I did one or maybe two issues that are like one issue stories where he, and then for whatever reason, they came and they said, okay, you can do what you want to do in the Surfer. So then I did that whole Kree Skrull War thing to tie it off. But they never said that about the FF. The FF, I was just sort of like taking what I had wanted to do and getting it out there the best way I could, It was, that's the end of the Marvel age as far as I'm concerned, Walt Simonson and other people were still Starlin, we're still doing things, but to me, that was the end of the Marvel age in '89.
Oh, interesting.
I thought you brought space opera back to Silver Surfer, or to the Silver Surfer for the first time. He was the first time. That was the first time I ever thought he was really interesting.
Yeah, me too. I started, my first book was Fantastic Four 49, right in the middle of the Galactus trilogy, right? Mm-hmm. So, why wouldn't I decide to become a Marvel fan when I'm looking at some of Kirby's best artwork and some of Stan's best stories and these great characters and all that? But then they did that for 15 years of he flies away feeling bad because he's trapped on Earth. So when Shooter got in touch and said, we want you to do a Silver Surfer book, I said, well, first off, from what I understand, when Stan left, he said, you guys can do every character except the Silver Surfer. I want to save that for me. And I said, what does Stan have to say about this? And Shooter said, I'm in charge now. And I want a Silver Surfer book. I don't know what he and Stan talked about with all of that, but, so I said, well, all right, I'll do the Surfer, but I want to get him off Earth. And they said, no, got it. There's a formula and you have to do that. I go, okay. So I did a first issue, which later got reprinted in Marvel Fanfare, Surfer, Mantis on Earth, right? But then again, somebody somewhere changed, Shooter, I guess, changed their minds and they called up and said, well, actually, no, you can get him off Earth. And so we started over again. I did another number one in which he does get off Earth. And I'm, it's one of those things, again, a challenge, like, okay, well, he's been stuck here all this time. How does he get off then? And fortunately, I had the idea about the board. If you don't have the board, you can get off. And so we got him off Earth. And then, of course, there's all the Marvel space characters from the Fantastic Four and the Avengers and every place else. They're all there. And he was the guy who could tap into all of them. And so it just expanded exponentially from that point up until they said, don't do that anymore, so.
That is crazy, because if they do not let Surfer off the planet with you, because when you left, I thought you ended it really well, but like now, thank you for telling us that. But Valentino took over 2 episodes, but then Starlin took over. If you do not get Surfer off the planet, there is no Infinity Gauntlet. Like, think about that. I was like, oh my goodness, that key. Like, that's.
Well, so much of it is just, happenstance as things, I'm sure if somehow the book was still being published. If he'd been on Earth for 31 issues, Starlin would have picked it up and done, done Starlin stuff with that. But there was just there'd been so many good characters invented in space over this time. And you could, if you were the Avengers, you could do the Kree Skrull War, or if you were the FF, you could do Annihilus or whatever. But the fact that he could deal with all of them was just, it just seemed obvious to me, but see, I come from an era when I started, I've said, they gave me complete freedom. And so they just sort of said, it's all up to you. We're not going to be looking over your shoulder. I've said this a zillion times, but you have to turn it in on time every month and it has to sell. If you can do those two things, we don't care what else you do, because we don't have time to be micromanaging all these books. And so it was, all those books in the 70s were entirely me, right? I would decide what was going to happen. I would do it. I wouldn't get any pushback, and so the idea that, like, we're editorial and now we're going to tell you what to do, and limit what you can get away with and all that kind of stuff, it was definitely a rupture. It was definitely, we were not at all on the same planet, let alone the same page. But until that point, that was, anyway. Yeah.
It's a long time ago, Steve.
Yeah.
That was
It
a long
is.
time ago.
Yeah, it is. And I find that weird, I mean, the fact that you guys still are aware of it, let alone can get it and like it and all that kind of stuff. Because we were just doing comics for the, for the immediate time frame. But as it turns out, the 70s were in general a very creative time. I mean, 70s movies are a thing, 70s music is a thing, I mean, 70s comics are a thing. We were just all operating in a very friendly environment, and encouraged to be as creative as possible. And so in whatever field we were in, that's what a lot of us did.
But I think pop culture has its own, eras, and in comics in the 70s were just a huge part of pop culture back then.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and even, I mean, even the 70s, I mean, I was just a baby, but,
Mhm.
that stuff for me, going back and re-exploring and rediscovering these stories, um, it shaped my life, and Ken's too, I'm sure. So,
Well, that was, again, that was me, that was Steve Gerber, that was Don McGregor, that was, Frank Brunner. And I mean, it was just, we were just doing what it seemed we should do, you know. As I said, I was trying to write the best Steve Englehart stories I could write, but I was also trying to write the best Marvel comics I could write, which was a separate layer of all that stuff, and later on the best DC comics I could write, and whatever. Um, it was just it was a good time. I was fortunate enough to be of the right age to be there at the right time to do that kind of stuff. And um, I, again, it's weird, but maybe not so weird that stuff is still around. It keeps getting reprinted. It keeps getting mined for use in the movies. I keep talking to people like you, who are still finding something of value in it. I mean, it wasn't written to be thrown away, but neither was it written with the idea that it would be readily available 50 years later. So, we were just lucky. I mean, we were lucky to be in the right place at the right time and be able to do what we did do with that place and time.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to many creators that's one of the questions I always ask is, you'd think that 50 years from now that you'd be talking about your stuff that you wrote, and you didn't even think that anybody was going to read it, let alone still talking about it. So it's it's great. I have one more question on you on the Avengers stuff though,
Sure.
because um, I didn't bring this up yet, but the Serpent Crown saga with the Squadron
Mm,
Supreme.
mhm.
Um, that was to me, I mean, obviously the Squadron Supreme analogs for all of DC's characters. Um,
Right.
but did you created like you came up with the templates for most of the rest of the the satellite era JLA guys like the Green Arrow and Black Canary and uh that who's it Captain Hawk and uh Golden
Uh,
Archer and Lady Lark and all them. Was that you? That was you, right?
well, the Golden Archer was me. I think the rest of it was Roy, actually. I think Roy had pretty much fleshed out the Squadron Supreme because, again, Roy loves that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, he he was a DC fan before he was a Marvel guy, right? And he was a 40s fan because he's older than I am, and all that. Um, so, um, no, the Squadron Supreme, I think, was pretty much there. I did the Golden Archer as as a Captain America in my Nomad part of Captain America. It was always a joke name because it was Hawkeye in disguise, right? So it would seem like that would be a joke name. Um, but Lady Lark and those people, I think that's Roy.
Oh,
Yeah.
I don't remember seeing them in like prior to the Serpent Crown saga. Like I
They
don't.
were in, I
They
think, the
in,
Fantastic Four. I think he did them in the Fantastic Four when he was writing them. Um, you'd have to look on the Marvel Encyclopedia to
I
see
mean,
where they came from, but
I like to think
um,
of myself as a little bit of an encyclopedia, and I couldn't. I can't remember them.
no,
But
I did not. No, I did not invent them. I mean, they existed prior to that appearance. That's I can tell
okay,
you that for sure. Um, uh, but it made going to an alternate universe, and again, Nelson Rockefeller as the president and all
Mhm.
that stuff. It was a political time in the 70s too, right? So,
yes.
um, uh, yeah. That so have I completely destroyed your question now, or
No, no, that was no, but it was I liked the parallels really between the Defenders and the Avengers crossover. That was kind of like some JLA, JSA, and then with the Squadron Supreme and the Avengers was like the Avengers JLA, kind of
yeah, yeah.
a crossover without it having a crossover, or a company crossover.
Yeah, I never considered the Squadron Supreme to be real close analogs. I mean, they all fit the right categories, but I never thought of Hyperion as being Superman, for example. I thought he was Hyperion. That whole group, I know where they came from. I know who they're supposed to be, but I never thought of them as the JLA. Um, I had a different image of the JLA, which oddly enough, I got to work with later on. Wasn't planning on that.
Oh,
Was that just right place, right time again for you, or
Yeah. I mean, again, I've told this story a lot and I will boil it way down. But I mean, when I left Marvel in the 70s, my wife had traveled in Europe by herself for a year before she knew me. And I thought that sounded like cool. So we started to make arrangements, sell our house, go to Europe. And then Jeanette Kahn called up and said she wanted me to come over and in her words, do for the JLA what I did for the Avengers, give them characterizations and backstories and all that kind of stuff. And I said, okay, I'll do that for the limited amount of time that I have. And I also want to do Batman because I've never, I love Batman and I didn't think I'd ever have a chance to do him. So that's how I got there. But um, no, I wasn't planning on going to DC. She came and got me.
oh, it's nice to be wanted.
Yeah, you
Eh,
know. Um, but it was also nice to be able to say, I'll give you 6 months or 8 months or whatever it was, but then I'm definitely leaving the country and going to go travel, So I think over the course of my JLA, I was able to do what she wanted. I, do stories that focused on each one of those guys and or two at a time or whatever it was. But I mean, give them personalities and backstories and so forth. But the other upshot of that, again, sort of like the the Avengers Defenders crossover, where circumstances dictated how Mantis is going to appear. With Batman, I knew I had this many issues. So from the start, I was thinking about it as like a beginning, a middle, and an end. Here's what I'm going to, and again, I didn't know specifically what I was going to do, but I didn't look at it as like, I'll be writing Batman for the next 30 years so I can take my time and just sort of see where it goes. I was sort of forced to, I now call it the espresso version of Batman. I just had to sort of take everything that I thought was cool about Batman and put it in those issues. Right. So there was no wasted uh, time or effort in that, but that's a whole different company. You're not talking about that.
That's okay. I said there were going to be a couple of tangent questions, but I have one more question. Did you leave any toys in the toy box? Were there any stories you wanted to tell that you didn't get to tell, or
Yeah, but that was primarily Malibu. With the big two, I could have, if circumstances had been different, I could have written JLA and Batman for a lot longer than I did. Um, um, but the main thing is Nightman, in that um, Nightman, at the end of his run in Malibu, he split into two people, and and what I really wanted to do was write the Malibu Nightman and the Marvel Nightman, and do that thing when they always talk about, how Simon Williams' brain got put into the Vision. And as soon as that happened, they started to diverge. And that's what I wanted to do with the Nightman stuff, was like, here are these guys, they're both exactly the same at this point, but one of them's living in the Marvel universe and one of them's living in the Malibu universe. And that would be interesting to write two Nightman books and see where they would go. That didn't happen. And I've always regretted that. And as I've also said many times, when we did the Malibu books, when we were negotiating the whole thing in the beginning, us creators said, we want to own our characters. And Malibu said, no, we're going to own them, but we'll give you a percentage of the income for your books. And so that set of contracts has kept the Malibu characters out of sight ever since, because once Marvel bought them, they did not want to be giving out a percentage of the income. And why? Because tomorrow the guy writing the X-Men would show up and go, well, I want the same deal, right? And Marvel's not going to open that can of worms. So all of our Malibu characters have just disappeared ever since Marvel bought them, which is unfortunate. In many ways. I mean, there are characters like Nightman who have no analog in the Marvel universe. In the 2000s, early 2000s, when I was working for Brevoort doing the Hellcat thing and the Mantis Celestial Quest, they said, we are going to bring back the Malibu characters. We want you to do that, bring them into the Marvel universe. I said to Tom what I said to Jeanette 30 years earlier. It's like, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to need a double-sized book, because there's a lot of characters. I have to introduce them. I have to do, all this kind of stuff. Plus, they're in the Marvel universe. So I need a double-sized book. And he said to me, there is no artist today who could draw a double-sized book monthly that the fans would like to see. And there's no artist that the fans would like to see who can draw a double-sized book monthly, which was, Marvel's editorial response to that. But I went ahead with it. And this was when I was first discovering how much the business had changed while I'd been doing other things. because they needed to have like a list of the 12 issues. What am I going to do in issues 1 through 12? And as you may have gathered from what I've been telling you for the last hour, I have no
Just give
fucking
me the
idea what I'm
pants.
going to be doing in the 12th, you know? And if I was just a year down the line checking boxes because I thought this would sound cool a year ago, no. So I don't know where this would have gone if it had gone forward, but in any event, I turned all that stuff in, and then they came and they said, well, we've decided otherwise. We're not going to do the Malibu stuff. But again, I was looking forward to the idea of, like, Prime would go to Professor Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, right? But like all these Malibu characters were famous in their own world, and to get tossed into the Marvel universe, nobody knew who they were. They had no cred, no aura, and they didn't know that Spider-Man was important. I mean, I thought it would be really fun to write that, these people waking up in a brand new world and having to figure out the world and make their own way. And when they did, all their family was gone, everything was, it was like, there were a lot of interesting aspects to that, but that was as far as it got. Somebody somewhere looked at the contracts and said, no, we're not actually going to do that. And so I don't expect you'll ever see Nightman or any of those guys again. I had hopes when Disney bought Marvel that they might look at this and go, well, we own these characters. Why don't we do something with them? But that hasn't happened. So, so that answers your question. There's a lot of that's my unfinished stuff, the Malibu stuff that I was going somewhere. But I mean, again, the whole East Coast, West Coast Civil War, that's one that I didn't get to do either. I mean, so there's various things like that. But I think the Malibu is the one that stings the most, because of the way Malibu wanted to run the thing in the original version, we can't ever see them again.
Yeah, that's kind of a bummer.
Yeah.
But I do kind of think at some point Disney's going to brush them off. You got to think that.
I would hope so. I mean, again, I forget the actual percentage. I think it was 5%. But I mean, if you make 95% of something, it seems like better than 100% of nothing. But
Yeah.
I'm not running a giant corporation. I don't know.
I don't know.
I mean, how much money could you?
Yeah.
I don't think you'd lose that much money by reinstating. I mean, James Robinson's Firearm. I mean, there's a lot of nice little characters and people to do them there, but that's a whole other thing.
Maybe someone from Disney will watch this podcast and say,
Yeah.
"Hey, let me go look
Come
at
on,
those
buddy.
guys." Yeah, let me go look at these guys. What about is there any villains that you wish you used that you didn't get a chance to?
Well, again, since I was creating everything at the Malibu stuff, that's heroes and villains and all that, I had Adam Bob, who turned out to be not a good guy, and his power was he could sort of transmute anything. And I thought, that's like all powerful. What the hell am I going to do with that? And didn't ever have to answer that question because I never got a chance to do it. But I really, I thought that would be a really interesting character to play with. Otherwise, I think I sort of did any series that I got into. I did the heroes, I did the villains, and usually was around long enough to to have a good run on them, and so I didn't end up thinking, oh man, if only I could write Baron Mordo one more time. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, no, and I want to personally thank you for Master Pandemonium because he's my favorite villain of all time. He is.
Cool.
He is.
Yeah.
Bud talks about it all the time.
I think I actually sent you a picture of the artwork I had done. Did I show you? It's on my
Show me
wall.
again.
My Master Pandemonium original art.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
No, I don't think I've seen that before. But
Yep. That's
a guy made out of demons.
it's inspired creation. So, to be able to say, I had this guy made out of demons and he's a five-pointed soul that's been scattered across creation. And he's a villain with a quest. I was like, I've never
Yeah.
seen a villain with a quest, and I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. He was fun. Yeah.
yeah, it wasn't really, and I didn't even really think he was a bad guy. He was a bad guy by circumstance. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, again, if I'd stuck around, I would have done more. But I did what I did with him, and there was obviously a whole lot more to do. But that doesn't register for me as like I was just about ready to do something and I couldn't, which the other things were. So I feel that a little bit more.
I hope you didn't plan on absorbing, because you created the twins and Tommy and Speed and Wiccan now, and
Yeah.
after you left, there was the whole Master Pandemonium, twins arms and
baby
it was
hands.
crazy.
Yeah.
The baby hand. We call it the baby hands here in Avengers Forever. I don't know if you were aware of that, but
No, I was not.
yeah. Can I ask you a West Coast Avengers question?
Sure.
So because we are counting down to 800 issues of Avengers. It's going to be released in January, and before we figured that out, we were going over your West Coast Avengers, who were specifically Hank Pym, and your West Coast Avengers run. Me and Bud were saying Hank Pym is the main character in your West Coast Avengers story. You had it was like a whole redemption arc. You
Right.
eventually made him Pockets Pym. Did you like Pym, or was that your plan coming in? Because you brought him in from Stern. Stern wrote the miniseries, and then you wrote the volume. And was that your plan? On want to redeem Hank Pym here?
Yeah. I mean, not from the start, but again, I'd read everybody, including Ant-Man and Giant Man and the Wasp and all that stuff. And he always seemed like he was a secondary character. He never quite made it with the rest of the guys. And that was my sense of him. And so I thought, well, for my purposes, that's his sense of him, that he wasn't quite, had never gotten over the hump exactly. And so I got the idea of him committing suicide. But I didn't really want to kill him. And so obviously then there had to be a redemption arc, to go with that. But again, that was just kind of like, this is what the character is, and where would he go from here, and so forth. The Dr. Pym thing was Mark Grunwald's idea. Grunwald loved Doctor Who, and he wanted Hank Pym to become Dr. Pym. In the 80s, there was a little bit more, particularly with Grunwald, more editorial input. But again, not like you have to do this. It's just, I really would think this would be a good idea. Can you do, nobody offered me ideas. Well, Roy suggested doing the 50s Captain America when I took over Captain America. And I think that's the only time in the 70s when somebody said, here's an idea, see what you can do with it. Grunwald did more of that in the 80s. And so he wanted Dr. Pym, and so we did Dr. Pym, But in terms of Hank himself, I just felt like he's never really been as interesting as he ought to be, and doing I couldn't think of anything to do with Ant-Man or Giant Man or Yellow Jacket that would like make him a superstar. So I thought it was a good idea to go in the other direction, to have him back out of the costumes and become more of a scientist and so forth. But on the way there, I did the whole suicide thing.
Sorry, I'm saying that was a pivotal moment in Hank Pym history, and it's just like, oh, you bring in a whole bunch of stuff, and everything comes out of that. It's phenomenal to me.
Well, I mean, again, I want to do something with every character. I'm particularly in group books. I don't want to have, Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man be the stars, and everybody else is just standing in the background, falling down, as they said about Wanda or whatever. So I wanted to do stuff with Hank Pym. I wanted to do stuff with Wonder Man. I wanted to do stuff with Tigra. Um, you know, all those people. I was looking for something epic, something I could do with each one.
You know what I consider epic with your work on the main Avengers line? Because you kind of brought it up right now. You talked about Cap and Thor and Simon, and you brought Beast in as an Avenger in issue 136, and Beast stayed on the roster for like 8-9 years. Like he stayed like 85 issues after you brought him in. Like he was a mainstay on the team, and like many consider that like the team. I was like, how much fun did you have with bringing like Hank McCoy onto the team as the lovable furry beast?
Well, the Beast was my firstborn. He's the one that I started with, and so I had a great affection for the Beast. Um, the book ended after 6 issues. I finished off a story in the Hulk, and but he was still a free agent when it was time to revamp the Avengers, and I put him in there. I certainly didn't expect him, to be a member that long. I didn't. There was still no new X-Men book, so it wasn't like there was some cutoff point that I could envision where he would have to leave the Avengers. But um, he's such a good character. I think Shooter and the people who came after me, liked him, and so they kept him around. But um, I just was, if I'd been writing the book, in another year or two, whatever, I would have revamped the team again, and whether I would have kept him or not, I don't know. So he's fortunate in that regard. But I do know that a lot of people, not so much anymore, but there was a time when people thought he was more of an Avenger than he was an X-Man.
Yep.
So
us old people think he's more of an Avenger.
well, if you were really old, you'd think he was an X-Man.
Uh-huh.
Well, Hank McCoy maybe an X-Man, but Blue Furry Beast, Avenger.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So, can I say?
You got anything else, bud?
I don't. Steve, what are you doing now, and where can people find you?
I'm not doing much of anything that's published. I'm still writing. I like to tell stories. I like to write characters, as I've said many times already. But again, I've set myself challenges to do things that maybe aren't commercial, but are interesting to write. I've come close. There was some talk about DC picking up some of them, but that seems to have died back. I mean, DC was Jim Lee told me that they were gonna finally do the unpublished Dark Detective 3 that Marshall died when he was, penciling. And I heard that from Jim for a number of months. And one Friday afternoon, he texted me and said, "We're going to start in 2 weeks." And then nothing happened after that. And that's a different story. But I mean, there are people at DC who they never got over the fact that an outsider was brought in to fix their characters. And there are people at DC who, to this day, not the same ones so much, but they're spiritual heirs who just, they don't see Steve Englehart and DC as being a match. And so
Hmm.
apparently Jim got overruled on whether we were going to do this or not. But the idea was we were going to do the Batman stuff, and then he wanted to take a look at this other stuff that I've been doing, and he said that they're doing, what is it? I guess it's a new Vertigo line or something, and he was looking at some of my stuff to fit into that. But I don't think I have a future at DC. So, you know.
Well, you know,
But anyway, so that's as close as anybody's come to like publishing any of it. I don't do social media. You won't find me on any of the social media platforms. I'm just happy to write and you know, enjoy life, you know.
Well, we're glad that we know where to find you if we want you to come on and talk
Yeah, you
again.
do.
So we
yeah.
appreciate that. But Ken, unless you have final words.
Ladies and gentlemen, again, thank you, Steve Englehart. Thank you for all the stories and everything. I hope to catch you next time, guys.
All right.
Okay.